Kiseki Films is one of those disappointing mishmash of disjointed memories in the UK that very few people even talk about it these days. Made famous, or more infamous, in 1993 with its much-anticipated release of the third instalment of Urotsuki Doji. Yeah, the 1990s was a dark time in UK fandom, with its endless struggle against the British press to prove that anime was more than tentacle, rape, boobies and violence, with the major labels releasing more tentacle, rape, boobies and violence. Hampered not even in part by Manga Video before it became the international titan it is now, Manga Entertainment, with its continuous release of cheap anime imports with less than exciting plots that appealed more to the instant satisfaction of the teen gaming community than to anything really art house. To say Urotsuki Doji was big, albeit for the wrong reasons, in the 1990s would have been an understatement. The Manga Video actually had the cheek to release its semi-sequel, Legend of the Demon Room, was in itself a minor miracle. And then we have Kiseki Films, what was supposed to be the rival to Manga Video, albeit with poor marketing potential. It could have taken the UK by storm with the Urotsuki Doji 3, and it very nearly almost did. It did release some real quality gems in its time, albeit more with pressure from the fans, which suggests that Kiseki Films didn't know what they were dealing with. And it did finally release Robotech on video in the UK, even if it was only in 6 volumes and consisting of but a third of the Macross saga. The label did actually show some promise, but it faltered on so many things from not paying its translators and researchers, of which I was one, and then paying them no heed whatsoever. Believe me, I'm not bitter about that. And then it started cutting corners with even worse voice actors, and then decided dropping voice acting altogether with poor subtitles that sadly the average mainstream fan was unwilling to buy. In fact, so maligned is the label today that even if you try to look it up, you're lucky to find a 3-sentence paragraph on Wikipedia. It's kind of sad really, as the label did actually have some potential, had it gone in a different direction. But it decided to follow the model of Manga Video and as a result failed terribly, which is not out of the norm for many labels that tried to cash in on the schlock and crappy anime releases in the UK at the time. And yet for all its faults, and there are many, Crusader Films at least tried to be different with Catgirl Nuku Nuku. And so did Anime UK with Chaos Century Beast Warriors. And don't you worry, folks. Let me get into those gems soon enough. Among the actual success stories in the UK anime-wise was Dominion Tank Police, an early release from Manga Video that actually followed hot on the heels of the controversial Fist of the North Star, which I will confess is a movie I still hold in higher regard than most of my contemporaries do. Dominion Tank Police brought about what would become Shiro Mania, which would eventually assure Dominion's creator, Masamune Shiro, a cash cow in Ghost in the Shell, allowing him to pursue a more important career making... Well, okay, he makes porn now. But you gotta hand it to the guy, at least he's honest about what he really wants to do with his success. Anyway, suffice to say, despite complaints of the soundtrack change, something for which Manga Video was famous for at the time, Street Fighter II being an example notwithstanding, Tank Police was a major success, and to me still ranks as one of the top 10 animes to be released in the West to date. Hell, I can't even fault its English dub. Sure, it's not Shakespearean, but effort was actually put into it, and it was obvious you could tell the staff enjoyed what they were working with. So it was only a matter of time before we would see something else from Shiro, right? Well, Appleseed, the movie, was a little hard to come by for a while, due to the distributor being an ass in the cost of licensing. Which is ironic, because it's not a great film to begin with. And compared to the dubbing in Tank Police, Appleseed is a comparative disaster. So Kiseki got in on the Shiro buzz with a much cheaper work, Black Magic M-66, an anime supposedly based on Shiro's first manga, Black Magic, which has very little to do with the original plot, save for, well, killer robots. In fact, the stark differences couldn't be more apparent. With a mixture of magic, anthropomorphism, and cyberpunk thrown into the mix, the original manga is so very difficult to follow, with very little plot consistency as to give it any real justice as a story. I have to be honest with you, the whole reason Dark Horse probably published the comic in the West to begin with was probably to cash in on the success of the more popular Appleseed manga series, which is far more superior in its production quality and storytelling, if not a bit of an over-convoluted mess. With Black Magic M-66 though, we have a simple enough plot. And forgive me if you've seen this somewhere before. Killer Robot goes on a rampage to kill a young girl.
I'll be back.
Yeah, the plot is so much like Terminator, it's surprising that James Cameron hasn't sued Towie for stealing his ideas. Still, it's not like Hollywood isn't guilty of the same thing, right? I'm not saying it doesn't have its original elements. It is anime after all. But all those elements are sadly few and far between. The borrowed cliches and elements are all there, and no amount of cyberpunk settings or unexplained tension between a north and south divide are ever going to hide that similarity. Look, it's obvious, and I know many fans who are hard-pressed to hide it. From the damn near indestructible, smarter for its own good machine to the relentless defender of said target, the similarities are just overbearing. In fact, the only real difference there is the target doesn't seem to come out of her own shell. Look, Sarah Connor at least has an arc. From a nobody barmaid to a battle-hardened survivalist determined to prepare her son for the apocalypse to come. But as far as Ferris is concerned, there's no polite way for me to say this. She's a spoiled blonde bimbo with no redeeming features, who after going through the most traumatic experience of her life, remains a spoiled blonde bimbo with no redeeming features, who can only write a few letters to her saviour and then promptly forget about her after a few weeks. That's gratitude for you. All that retrospective being said, is M-66 good? Well, it's a dated classic would be too polite a word, I suppose, for it. That M-66 has its place in the old-school foundation of the fandom is certainly not without contention. It certainly had its repeated place at anime conventions in the UK for years to come, just because it was there. But a classic? No, it's dated. Let's just leave it at that. It's like that wine you put on your shelf that was okay for a time, but there comes a point where you come round to it, you just can't find the right slice of cheese to swallow it with. And it's not that bad, it's just not actually good. It's just not, well, like Kiseki Films are released it in the UK, it's really not all that memorable. It has all its moments, of course. The build-up of the killings and the hunt itself is by far some of the most intense I have seen in a while, but it's still very 80s in its execution, and it's obvious that it takes all its tropes from Terminator, Alien, and the very low-budget slasher of its age. That might be a good thing for Japan, but for a release in the West, you shouldn't really expect much. I won't exactly call it a rip-off, it's just, well, unoriginal. And anything we could take as original from it is largely overlooked or just not plain explained. For convenience sake, though, I will confess that I was only looking at the subtitled version of this movie, as I do recall a rather bad dubbed version of M-66. The actors seemed so bored with their roles, it was almost as if they had no idea what they were voice acting to, or if at all interested in it. I do believe Kiseki Films was responsible for the dub, and there are many in my generation of anime fans that have woeful memories of how bad Kiseki was with its selection of voice actors and the treatment of translators and researchers, as I've mentioned before. Its lackluster approach to its major titles, of Rutsukidoji 3 and 4, sadly the biggest thing since Akira in the early 1990s, is a prime example of how Kiseki rested on its laurels, playing it safe rather than taking the risks that the dead manga video was prepared to take. It's also very sad to note that Kiseki didn't even end up being a potential pretender to the throne manga dominated for years. In fact, such bad memories of the dub have I that I can't even find the original dub or find a need to want to buy the DVD release short of any nostalgia I might have of simply having it on my DVD shelf. Believe me, I am not that desperate. In the end, even the subtitled version leaves me with mixed emotions. On the plus side, it's short enough to enjoy without thinking about it too much. Much of the old Shiro trope is here, from tactical thinking on behalf of the military to the over-the-top technology and the same character designs for the mad profession we so constantly see in his manga and anime from time to time. On the other hand, it's not like I haven't seen this done better before, like Terminator. Hell, even the music has way too many similarities, down to the techno-violin screeches for the robot shock moments. And if I have to be honest, if there is a choice between this and the other, well, sorry Shiro, Cameron comes out on top for me on this one. That was a little depressing note to end on. Maybe I should amp things up a little with something better known and a little less appreciated than it should be. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, ciao.